The scream cuts across the Wyoming basin like a knife through bone, raw, human, desperate. Cole Ransom urges his horse forward and finds hell painted across the prairie. A shattered wagon, supplies bleeding into cracked earth, and a child no older than 5 standing guard over her mother's body with nothing but a stick and eyes gone feral with terror. They said they only needed water, the girl whispers, and Cole knows someone did this on purpose. The woman's lips are cracked white, her pulse threading toward nothing, and the nearest doctor is 2 days' ride through country that kills without mercy. If you want to know whether this mother and daughter survived the frontier and what dark truth is hunting them across state lines, stay with me until the end. And when you do, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story can travel. The Wyoming sky stretched thin and blue above Cole Ransom's head, the kind of endlessness that made a man feel both free and alone in equal measure. He rode the fence line out of habit more than necessity. Cattle had been moved to higher pasture 2 weeks back and the wire was sound. But the ranch demanded motion, and motion kept the silence at bay. He'd lived with silence for 3 years now, ever since Sarah died. The gelding's ears flicked forward, and Cole straightened in the saddle. Something wasn't right. The air tasted wrong, copper and dust and something sharper. Then he heard it, a scream. Not the high, clean cry of a hawk or the frustrated bawl of a calf. Human, female, and cut short like someone had clapped a hand over a mouth. Cole spurred the horse hard, cresting the rise at a full gallop. What he saw stopped him cold. A wagon lay tilted in the basin below. One wheel snapped clean off, supplies scattered across 20 yards of scrub grass. Flour dusted the ground white. A water barrel had split open, its contents soaked into earth that wouldn't give it back. And standing in the center of the wreckage, small and rigid as a fence post, was a child. She couldn't have been more than 5. Her dress was sun-faded calico, torn at the hem, and she gripped a branch in both hands, holding it like a weapon, like she knew how to use it. Her hair was dark, wild, pulled half loose from braids, but it was her eyes that hit Cole hardest. They were the eyes of something cornered. "Easy," Cole said, dismounting slow. He kept his hands visible, his voice low. "I'm not here to hurt you." The girl didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, branch raised, between Cole and the woman lying motionless on the ground behind her. Cole's gut tightened. The woman, mid-20s maybe, dark hair matted with dust and blood, wasn't moving. Her skin had the gray-white look of someone sliding toward shock, and her lips were cracked deep enough to bleed. Dehydration, sunstroke, infection, if that gash on her temple was more than a day old. "Your mama?" Cole asked. The girl's chin lifted. "They said they only needed water." 4 words, clipped, hard, and they told Cole everything he needed to know. "Who said that?" "Men." The girl's knuckles went white around the branch. 3 of them. They broke the wheel, took the horses. Cole's jaw set. He scanned the basin, no hoof prints deep enough to track, no direction clear enough to follow. Whoever had done this was long gone, and they'd meant for these 2 to die out here. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl hesitated, then, barely audible, "Piper." "Piper," Cole repeated, soft as he could manage. "My name's Cole, and I need you to let me help your mama, or she's not going to make it through the night." Piper's grip didn't loosen. "You'll take her." I'll take you both," Cole said. "To my ranch. It's an hour's ride. There's food, water, a bed." He crouched down, meeting her eyes. "But if I don't get her there soon, none of that's going to matter." For a long moment, Piper just stared at him. Then slowly, she lowered the branch. Cole moved fast. He checked the woman's pulse, thready, too fast, and ran his hands over her limbs, checking for breaks. Her left ankle was swollen, maybe sprained, and the head wound was ugly but not deep. Dehydration was the real killer. He uncapped his canteen and wet her lips, tilting her head just enough to let a few drops slide into her mouth. She didn't wake. "Piper," he said, "I need you to hold this." He handed her the canteen. "Keep it steady." The girl took it with both hands, serious as a soldier. Cole lifted the woman, light, too light, and settled her across the saddle. Piper climbed up behind without being asked, her small hands fisting in Cole's shirt. He swung up last, holding the woman steady with one arm and guiding the horse with the other. "Hold on," he said, and nudged the gelding into a careful trot. The ride back was the longest hour of Cole's life. The woman, Piper's mama, stayed unconscious, her breathing shallow and rattling in a way that made Cole's chest ache. Piper didn't speak. She just held on, her face pressed against his back, and Cole felt the tiny tremors running through her like a current. By the time the ranch came into view, low-slung log house, barn weathered silver, corrals empty in the fading light, the sun was sinking blood red behind the mountains. Cole carried the woman inside and laid her on the bed in the spare room. It hadn't been used since Sarah died, and the sheets smelled faintly of dust and lavender. He stripped the woman's boots off, checked the swelling in her ankle, and cleaned the gash on her temple with whiskey and boiled water. She flinched once, a soft sound escaping her throat, but didn't wake. Piper stood in the doorway, silent and watchful. "She's strong," Cole said, more to himself than the girl. "She'll fight." Piper didn't answer. Cole built a fire in the stove and set water to boil. He found bread, butter, cold chicken from yesterday's supper. He set it on the table and gestured for Piper to sit. She didn't. "You need to eat," Cole said. "I'm not hungry." It was a lie. He could see it in the hollow of her cheeks, the way her eyes tracked the food like a hawk tracking prey. But she didn't move. Cole sat down, broke off a piece of bread, and ate it slowly. Then he pushed the plate toward her. "Your mama's going to need you strong when she wakes up," he said. "Can't do that on an empty stomach." Piper's resolve cracked. She darted forward, grabbed the chicken, and retreated to the corner by the stove. She ate fast, tearing at the meat with her teeth, her eyes never leaving Cole. He let her be. That night, Cole kept vigil by the woman's bedside. He changed the cloth on her forehead every hour, coaxed water between her lips when he could, and watched her chest rise and fall in the lamplight. Fever set in just after midnight, her skin burning, her body shaking hard enough to rattle the bed frame. Cole stripped the blankets back and soaked towels in cold water, laying them across her arms, her legs, her throat. He talked to her, low and steady, the way he used to talk to Sarah when the pain got bad. "You're going to be all right," he said. "You hear me? Your girl needs you. You don't get to quit." The woman's eyes moved beneath her lids, rapid and frantic, but she didn't wake. Piper appeared in the doorway some time past 2, her face pale in the shadows. "Is she dying?" the girl asked. Cole looked at her, then back at the woman. "Not if I can help it." Piper climbed onto the foot of the bed and curled up there, small and still, her eyes fixed on her mother's face. Cole didn't have the heart to move her. The fever broke just before dawn. Cole was half asleep in the chair, his head tipped back against the wall, when he heard it, a soft, shuddering breath, different from the ones before. He opened his eyes and found the woman staring at him. Her eyes were dark, clear, and full of questions. "Easy," Cole said. "You're safe." She tried to sit up and gasped, her hand flying to her head. "Don't," Cole said, rising. "You took a bad hit, and you've been burning with fever for 2 days." 2 days? Her voice was rough, barely a whisper. Her gaze darted past him, wild. "Piper! Where's Piper?" "Right here." Cole stepped aside, and the woman's eyes locked onto the small figure curled at the end of the bed. Relief broke across her face like a dam giving way. She reached for Piper, and the girl woke instantly, scrambling forward into her mother's arms. "Mama," Piper said, and the word came out choked. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." The woman held her daughter tight, her eyes squeezed shut, and Cole saw her shoulders shake. He stepped out of the room, giving them space. By the time the woman was strong enough to sit up and take broth, Cole had learned her name. Mara Vale. She'd been a school teacher in a town called Millerton, 200 miles east, widowed 6 months back when her husband, a freight hauler, was killed in what the marshal called a robbery gone wrong. She'd been traveling west to start over, to find work, to give Piper a life that didn't taste like grief. "And the men who broke your wagon?" Cole asked. Mara's face went hard. "I don't know who they were, but they weren't after water." "What were they after?" She looked at him for a long moment, weighing something. Then she said, quiet, "Me." Cole's gut turned to stone. "Why?" "I don't know." Mara's hands twisted in the blanket. But they knew my name, and they knew about Piper. That was when Cole understood. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. And whoever had sent those men wasn't done. Piper didn't speak for 3 days. She ate when Cole set food in front of her, slept curled against Mara's side, and watched everything with those sharp, wary eyes. But she didn't say a word. Then, on the 4th morning, Cole found her in the barn. She was crouched in the straw near the back stall, utterly still, and in her lap was the ranch's youngest barn cat, a scrawny orange tom with a chewed ear and a purr like a rusty hinge. Cole stopped in the doorway, not wanting to spook her. Piper stroked the cat's head, her small fingers careful, deliberate. The cat butted against her palm and purred louder. "His name's Brick," Cole said, soft. Piper looked up. "Why?" "Because he's too stubborn to die." Cole stepped closer, crouching a few feet away. "Found him half frozen in a snowdrift last winter. Figured he wouldn't last the night. But he did." Piper looked down at the cat. "He's strong." "Yeah," Cole said. "He is." Piper was quiet for a moment. Then she said, barely audible, "Mama's strong too." "I know." "Are you going to make us leave?" The question hit Cole like a fist. He looked at this small, fierce girl, this child who'd stood over her mother with a stick and eyes full of fire, and something old and buried shifted in his chest. "No," he said. "You can stay as long as you need." Piper's shoulders loosened, just a fraction. Then she went back to petting the cat. Mara was up and walking by the end of the week, though she still favored her left ankle and tired easy. She insisted on helping, washing dishes, mending a torn shirt, sweeping the kitchen floor, and Cole didn't fight her on it. He recognized the need to be useful, to prove you weren't a burden. He'd felt it himself after Sarah died. They fell into a rhythm. Cole worked the ranch, fixing fence, checking cattle, hauling water. Mara tended the house and kept Piper close. And slowly, the silence that had filled the place for 3 years began to crack. There was the sound of Piper's laughter when Brick chased a grasshopper across the porch, the smell of bread baking in the oven, the soft murmur of Mara reading aloud from an old book of fairy tales, Piper tucked against her side. Cole found himself lingering in the doorway, listening. One evening, Mara caught him. "You don't have to hover," she said, a faint smile tugging at her mouth. "Not hovering," Cole said. "Just making sure you're settled." "We're settled." Mara set the book aside, her expression turning serious. "And we owe you more than we can ever repay." "You don't owe me anything." "Cole." She said his name like a reprimand, gentle but firm. "You saved our lives. Don't pretend that's nothing." Cole looked at her, this woman who'd fought fever and fear and still held her head high, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. "You'd have done the same," he said. Mara's smile turned sad. "Not everyone would." The rider came on a Tuesday. Cole was shoeing a horse in the barn when he heard the hoofbeats, steady, deliberate, the gait of someone who wasn't in a hurry. He set the hoof down and stepped into the yard, his hand resting on the knife at his belt out of habit. The man who dismounted was tall, lean, dressed in a wool suit that had no business on a working ranch. He carried a leather satchel and wore spectacles that caught the light like coins. "Mr. Ransom?" the man said, his voice smooth and careful. "That's right." "My name is Gideon Sloan. I'm an attorney from Harbor City." He offered a hand and Cole shook it, briefly. "I'm here on behalf of a client regarding a Mrs. Mara Vale and her daughter, Piper." Cole's blood went cold. "What about them?" Sloan smiled and it didn't reach his eyes. "My client is Mrs. Eleanor Hastings, Piper's maternal grandmother. She's been searching for her daughter and granddaughter since the tragic death of Mr. Daniel Vale 6 months ago. She's quite concerned for their welfare." "They're fine," Cole said, flat. "I'm glad to hear it." Sloan adjusted his spectacles. "However, Mrs. Hastings believes that a child of Piper's age would be better served in a stable urban environment, with access to education, proper medical care, and the resources a woman of Mrs. Hastings' means can provide." Cole's jaw tightened. "Piper's got everything she needs right here." "With all due respect, Mr. Ransom, you're a bachelor rancher living alone in the Wyoming Territory. That's hardly an appropriate environment for a young girl. Sloane's tone was polite, reasonable, and cold as January ice. Mrs. Hastings is prepared to petition for custody, for Piper's sake. Behind Cole, the screen door opened. Mara stood on the porch, Piper half hidden behind her skirts. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "My mother," she said, "doesn't care about Piper's sake. She cares about control." Sloane turned toward her, his expression shifting to something meant to be sympathetic. "Mrs. Vale, I understand this is difficult, but your mother only wants what's best." "My mother," Mara cut in, her voice hardening, "disowned me when I married Daniel. She called him common, worthless. She told me I was dead to her." She stepped forward, her hand tight on Piper's shoulder. "She didn't want anything to do with us then, and she doesn't get to take my daughter now." Sloane's smile thinned. Mrs. Hastings is willing to overlook past grievances in the interest of her granddaughter's well-being. "Tell Mrs. Hastings," Mara said, each word deliberate, "that she can go to hell." Sloane's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. He reached into his satchel and withdrew a folded document, offering it to Mara. "This is a formal notice of intent to file for custody," he said. "You'll be expected to appear before a judge in Redstone within 30 days. I suggest you retain legal counsel." Mara took the paper, her hand shaking. Sloane tipped his hat, climbed back into the saddle, and rode off without another word. Cole watched him go, his fists clenched so hard his knuckles ached. When the dust settled, Mara sank onto the porch step, the notice crumpled in her hand. Piper pressed against her side, silent and pale. "She can't take her," Mara whispered. "She can't." Cole crouched in front of her, meeting her eyes. "She won't," he said. Mara looked at him, desperate and fragile and fierce all at once. "How do you know?" "Because I won't let her." And in that moment, Cole Ransom made a promise he intended to keep, no matter what it cost. That night, sleep didn't come. Cole sat at the kitchen table, the custody notice spread flat in the lamplight, reading the same lines over and over until the words blurred. Legal jargon, cold, clinical language that reduced Piper to a case number and Mara to an unfit guardian. He'd seen plenty of cruelty in his life, men who'd steal, lie, kill for a few dollars. But this was different. This was cruelty dressed up in respectability, signed and sealed and delivered like it was righteous. The floorboards creaked behind him. Mara stood in the doorway, wrapped in one of Sarah's old shawls. Her hair was loose, her feet bare, and her eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "No." She crossed to the table and sat down across from him, her hands folding together in her lap. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The lamp hissed softly. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. "Tell me about her," Cole said finally. "Your mother." Mara's mouth tightened. "What do you want to know?" "Why she'd do this?" Mara looked down at her hands. "Eleanor Hastings doesn't do anything without a reason, and the reason is never kindness." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "My father was a shipping magnate, wealthy, powerful. When he died, my mother inherited everything, the business, the estate, the reputation. She built her life around control. Who she knew, who owed her favors, who she could manipulate. And you didn't fit," Cole said. "No." Mara's voice went soft, distant. "I wanted to teach. I wanted to marry for love, not advantage. So I did. I met Daniel at a church social. He was kind, hardworking, honest. Everything my mother despised." She looked up, meeting Cole's eyes. "She told me if I married him, I was no longer her daughter. So I chose him. And I never looked back. Until now." Mara's jaw clenched. She didn't care about me when I was struggling to make ends meet after Daniel died. Didn't care when Piper and I were living in a boarding house with one room and no heat. But now she wants custody? She shook her head, bitter. There's something else, something she's not saying. Cole believed her. He'd seen the lawyer's face, the cold calculation behind the polite words. This wasn't about a grandmother's love. This was a transaction. "We'll fight her," he said. Mara's expression cracked, just for a second. "With what?" I don't have money for a lawyer. I don't have. Her voice broke, and she pressed a hand to her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Cole rose, moved around the table, and crouched beside her chair. He didn't touch her, didn't know if he had the right, but he stayed close. You've got me, he said, quiet and steady. And I'm not letting her take Piper. I don't care what it costs. Mara looked at him, tears streaking her face, and something raw passed between them, gratitude, desperation, and something deeper that neither of them had words for. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for us? Cole thought about the empty house, the silence, the 3 years he'd spent moving through days like a ghost, too numb to feel and too scared to care. Because you brought life back, he said simply. Mara's breath caught. Then slowly, she reached out and took his hand. Her grip was warm, steady, and real. And for the first time in years, Cole didn't feel alone. The next morning, Cole rode into Benton, the nearest town with a telegraph office and a lawyer worth talking to. The ride took 4 hours through country that was equal parts beautiful and brutal, the kind of land that tested a man's mettle and didn't apologize. Benton was a rough-edged frontier town, all false front buildings and muddy streets, the kind of place where a man could get a drink, a meal, and a bullet in that order if he wasn't careful. Cole hitched his horse outside the law office and stepped inside. The man behind the desk was in his 50s, silver-haired, with the look of someone who'd seen the worst of human nature and wasn't impressed. His name was Elias Crane, and he had a reputation for being honest in a profession that didn't value it. Mr. Ransom, Crane said, shaking Cole's hand. What brings you to town? Cole laid the custody notice on the desk. This. Crane picked it up, read it, and his expression darkened. Eleanor Hastings, I know the name. She's got reach, money, influence, connections in Cheyenne and beyond. He set the paper down and looked at Cole. This won't be easy. I didn't expect it to be. What's your relationship to the mother and child? They're staying at my ranch, Cole said. Mara's recovering from an attack. Someone sabotaged their wagon, left them to die in the basin. If I hadn't found them, they'd be dead. Crane's eyebrows lifted. You report it to the marshal? Not yet. Do it. Today. Crane leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. If this goes to court, the judge is going to look at stability, safety, and resources. Mrs. Hastings will argue that a wealthy home in Harbor City is better for the child than a bachelor's ranch in the middle of nowhere. It's not the middle of nowhere, Cole said, his voice hard. It's a working ranch. Clean. Safe. Piper's happy there. I believe you, but you're going to have to prove it. Crane paused. There's one way to make this case stronger. How? Marry the mother. Cole went still. Crane continued, matter of fact. A married couple with stable income and a home is a lot harder to argue against than a single woman with no resources and a bachelor offering charity. It removes the question of propriety, makes you a legal guardian, gives you standing in court. That's... Cole stopped, the words tangling in his throat. Practical, Crane finished. I'm not saying it's romantic. I'm saying it's effective. He met Cole's eyes. But it only works if both of you are willing. A marriage of convenience is still a marriage. And if the judge gets even a whiff that it's a sham, you'll lose. Cole's mind raced. Marriage. He hadn't even considered it, not since Sarah. The thought of standing in front of a preacher again, saying those vows, felt like opening a wound that had barely healed. But then he thought of Piper, of Mara, of the way the ranch had stopped feeling like a tomb. I'll talk to her, he said. Crane nodded. Do it soon. We've got less than 30 days, and I need time to build a case. Cole made one more stop before leaving town, the marshal's office. Marshal Tom Grady was a broad-shouldered man with a handlebar mustache and the kind of eyes that had seen too much and remembered all of it. He listened to Cole's account of the wagon attack without interrupting, his expression growing grimmer with every detail. 3 men, Grady repeated. Knew her name. Knew about the girl. That's what she said. Grady leaned back in his chair, his jaw working. I'll send word to the neighboring counties, see if anyone's reported similar incidents. But without descriptions, without tracks, he shook his head. It's a long shot. I know. Cole stood, but I wanted it on record. Smart. Grady walked him to the door. You watch yourself, Ransom. If someone's targeting that woman, they might not stop just because she's at your place. Cole's hand drifted to the revolver at his hip. Let them try. By the time Cole rode back to the ranch, the sun was sinking low, painting the sky in shades of burnt orange and deep violet. He found Mara in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with flour dusted across her hands and forearms. Piper sat at the table, carefully copying letters onto a slate. Mara looked up when Cole entered, her expression hopeful and anxious all at once. What did the lawyer say? Cole pulled off his hat and set it on the peg by the door. He said we've got a fight ahead, but he thinks we can win. How? Cole hesitated. Then he said, as straightforward as he could manage, he thinks we should get married. The room went silent. Piper's chalk stopped mid-letter. Mara's hands stilled in the dough, her eyes widening. Married, she repeated, her voice faint. It's practical, Cole said quickly, repeating Crane's words like a shield. A married couple has a stronger case than a single woman and a bachelor offering charity. It gives us standing, makes me a legal guardian, removes any question of... He stopped, searching for the right word. Propriety. Mara stared at him, her face unreadable. Then she looked down at her hands, at the dough clinging to her fingers. You're asking me to marry you, she said slowly, so we can keep my daughter. Yes. Not because you... She stopped, her cheeks flushing. Not for any other reason. Cole's chest tightened. I'm asking because it's the right move, the smart move, and because I meant what I said. I'm not letting her take Piper. Mara was quiet for a long time. Piper watched them both, her eyes wide and solemn. Finally, Mara lifted her head. If I say yes, she said, her voice steady now, it's a real marriage. On paper, in court, in front of anyone who asks. She paused. But not in practice. Not unless... She faltered, then pushed forward. Not unless we both decide otherwise. Someday. Cole nodded, relief and something else flooding through him. Agreed. Mara wiped her hands on her apron, leaving streaks of flour, and extended one toward him. Then yes, I'll marry you, Cole Ransom. Cole took her hand, still dusted with flour, still warm from the dough, and shook it. Piper's voice cut through the moment, small and clear. Does that mean Cole's going to be my papa? Mara's breath hitched. She looked at Cole, a question in her eyes. Cole crouched down so he was level with Piper. If that's all right with you? Piper considered this gravely, then she nodded. Okay, but only if Brick can come inside when it snows. Cole's mouth twitched. Deal. Yet, they were married 3 days later in the Benton church, with Elias Crane and the preacher's wife as witnesses. Mara wore a simple blue dress she'd mended herself, and Cole wore his cleanest shirt and the suit jacket he'd packed away after Sarah's funeral. Piper stood between them, holding a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked that morning. The ceremony was brief. The preacher's words washed over Cole like water, familiar, distant, surreal. When it came time to say, I do, his voice came out steady, even though his hands weren't. Mara's voice was strong. They didn't kiss. Cole offered his arm, and Mara took it, and they walked out of the church as husband and wife in name, if not in truth. Afterward, they signed the marriage certificate in Crane's office. The lawyer witnessed it, stamped it, and filed it with the county clerk. Congratulations, Crane said, though his tone was more businesslike than celebratory. Now we build the rest of the case. I'll need character references, financial records, anything that shows stability and competence. You'll have it, Cole said. On the ride back to the ranch, Piper fell asleep in Mara's lap, her head pillowed against her mother's shoulder. Mara stroked the girl's hair absently, her gaze distant. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. Cole glanced at her. Do you? I asked first. He thought about it, really thought about it. The weight of the ring on his finger, still strange and new. The vows he'd spoken, the promises he'd made. The way the ranch had felt when he'd left that morning, and the way it would feel when he returned. No, he said. I don't. Mara's expression softened. Good. Neither do I. The first week of this marriage passed in a strange, careful dance. Cole moved his things into the spare room. Mara and Piper kept the main bedroom, and they settled into a routine that was domestic without being intimate. Meals together, evening reading by the fire, Piper's laughter threading through the house like sunlight. But there were moments, fleeting, fragile, when Cole caught Mara watching him with something that looked like longing, or when their hands brushed reaching for the same dish, and neither of them pulled away as quickly as they should have. They didn't talk about it. Then, on the 8th day, Cole rode into Benton for supplies. He took his time, picking up flour, coffee, nails, a new bridle for the gelding. He stopped by Crane's office to drop off the financial records. He shared a drink with Marshal Grady and listened to the man grumble about cattle rustlers and claim jumpers. It was late afternoon when Cole started back. The sky was clear, the air cool and sharp with the promise of autumn. Cole let the horse set its own pace, his mind turning over the week's work, the upcoming court date, the 100 small tasks that filled a rancher's life. Then, halfway home, his instincts prickled. He reined in, scanning the horizon. Nothing. Just miles of open country, the grass rippling in the wind. But the feeling didn't leave, a crawling awareness at the back of his neck, the kind that had kept him alive through range wars and bitter winters. Something was wrong. Cole spurred the horse hard, racing across the basin toward the ranch. His heart pounded in time with the hoofbeats, faster and faster as the buildings came into view. The corral gate was open. The chickens were scattered across the yard, squawking and panicked. And the front door, always latched, always secure, hung ajar. Cole was off the horse before it stopped moving. He drew his revolver and went in low and fast, his mind cold and sharp. The kitchen was empty, the parlor too. Then he heard it, a muffled sound from the back of the house, a man's voice, low and threatening. Cole moved silent as a shadow, every muscle coiled tight. He reached the bedroom doorway and froze. 2 men stood inside. One held Mara by the arm, a knife pressed to her throat. The other had Piper, the girl struggling, kicking, her mouth covered by a dirty hand. And in the corner, a 3rd man rifled through the trunk at the foot of the bed, tossing clothes and belongings onto the floor. Cole's vision narrowed, his pulse slowed, and something old and dark and deadly rose up inside him like a flood. "Let them go," he said, his voice flat and cold. The man holding Mara turned, his eyes widening. The knife pressed harder, and a thin line of blood appeared on Mara's throat. "Back off," the man snarled, "or I cut her." Cole didn't back off. He raised the revolver, his hand steady as stone. "You've got 3 seconds," Cole said. "Then I put a bullet in your skull." "You won't risk it," Cole fired. The shot cracked through the room like thunder. The man holding Piper dropped instantly, a hole punched clean through his shoulder. He hit the floor screaming, and Piper scrambled away, her eyes wild. The man with the knife jerked, his grip loosening on Mara. She twisted, drove her elbow into his ribs, and broke free. Cole moved. He crossed the room in 2 strides and slammed the butt of the revolver into the man's temple. The man crumpled. The 3rd man lunged, pulling a pistol from his belt, and Cole kicked it out of his hand, grabbed him by the collar, and threw him against the wall hard enough to crack plaster. "Stay down," Cole growled. The man stayed down. Cole turned, his chest heaving, and found Mara and Piper huddled together by the bed. Mara's hand was pressed to her throat, blood seeping between her fingers. Piper's face was white, her eyes locked on Cole like he was something out of a nightmare. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Mara whispered, "Cole?" He dropped the gun and crossed to them, his hands shaking now, adrenaline crashing through him like a wave. "Are you hurt? Is she—" "We're okay," Mara said, her voice trembling. "We're okay." Cole reached for the cloth on the washstand and pressed it gently to Mara's throat. The cut was shallow, painful, but not deep. She winced, but didn't pull away. Behind them, the man Cole had shot groaned, clutching his shoulder. The other 2 were unconscious, or close to it. "Piper," Cole said, his voice rough. "Go to the kitchen. Don't come back until I say." Piper hesitated, then nodded and ran. Cole hauled the 3 men outside, tied them to the corral fence with rope meant for cattle, and rode hard for Benton to fetch the marshal. By the time he returned with Grady and 2 deputies, the sun had set, and the ranch was dark except for the lamp burning in the kitchen window. Mara was waiting for him on the porch. Later, after the marshal had taken the men into custody and promised to send word once they talked, Cole sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. Mara stood by the stove, a bandage wrapped around her throat, her expression unreadable. "You scared her," she said quietly. Cole's head snapped up. "I saved her." "I know." Mara's voice was soft but firm. "But you scared her. She's never seen anyone move like that, fight like that." Cole looked away, shame and anger twisting in his gut. "I didn't have a choice." "I'm not saying you did." Mara crossed to the table and sat down across from him. "I'm saying you need to talk to her, so she understands." "Understands what?" Mara met his eyes. "That you're still the man who saved us, not the man who hurt them." Cole's throat tightened. "What if I can't promise her that?" Mara reached across the table and took his hand, her grip fierce and steady. "Then promise her you'll try." Sad. That night, Cole knocked softly on Piper's door. She was curled in bed, Brick the cat tucked against her chest, her eyes open and watchful in the dark. "Can I come in?" Cole asked. Piper nodded. Cole sat on the edge of the bed, his hands resting on his knees. For a long moment, he didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry I scared you," he said finally. Piper didn't answer. "I did what I had to do to keep you and your mama safe," Cole continued. "But I know it was hard to see." Piper's voice was small, uncertain. "Are you a bad man?" Cole's chest ached. "I don't know, maybe. Sometimes." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But I'm trying to be good. For you. For your mama." Piper looked at him for a long time, her dark eyes searching his face. Then she said, "Mama says bad men don't say sorry." Cole's breath caught. "She says you're the best man she knows." Something broke inside Cole. Something old and scarred and hidden. He reached out, and Piper let him pull her into a hug, small and warm and trusting against his chest. "I'll keep you safe," he whispered. "I promise." And this time, he believed it. Marshal Grady returned to the ranch 2 days later with news that settled like lead in Cole's stomach. The three men had talked, not much, but enough. They weren't random drifters. They'd been hired, paid in advance to find Mara Vale, take the child, and make sure the mother didn't follow. The man who'd held the knife claimed they'd been told the job was a simple custody retrieval, that the grandmother had legal rights, and the mother was unstable. He swore they hadn't known it would turn violent. Cole didn't believe him for a second. "Did they say who hired them?" Cole asked, standing in the yard with his arms crossed. Grady shook his head. "They dealt with a middleman, some lawyer's clerk out of Cheyenne, paid in cash, no names exchanged. But the description matches someone who works for a firm with ties to Harbor City." He paused, his expression grim. "Eleanor Hastings' firm." Mara, standing on the porch with Piper behind her, went pale. "She sent them." "Can't prove it in court," Grady said. "Not without the middleman, and he's gone to ground. But yeah, I'd bet my badge she's behind it." Cole's hands curled into fists. "So what now?" "Now you lawyer up, like you're already doing, and you watch your backs." Grady's gaze shifted to Mara. "She's escalating, ma'am, which means she wants something more than just custody." Mara's voice came out tight. "What could she possibly want?" Grady hesitated, then said carefully, "Your late husband, Daniel Vale, what did he do for a living?" "He was a freight hauler. He worked contracts, dry goods, mining equipment, lumber." "Any chance he had money put away? Property? Anything worth killing over?" Mara frowned, shaking her head. "We lived paycheck to paycheck. When he died, there was barely enough to cover the funeral." "You sure about that?" "I'm sure." Mara's voice hardened. "Why?" Grady pulled a folded telegram from his pocket and handed it to her. "This came through yesterday, from a bank in Denver. They've been trying to reach you for months." Mara unfolded the telegram, her eyes scanning the lines. Then her face went slack. "What is it?" Cole asked, moving closer. Mara's hands shook. It's a trust. In Piper's name." She looked up, disbelief written across her face. "Established by Daniel's father before he died. managed by a firm in Denver. The principal is, her voice broke, $200,000. The air went out of the yard. Cole stared at her. 200,000. That's what it says. Mara's voice was faint, hollow. It was supposed to transfer to Piper when she turned 5. But because Daniel died, they needed my signature to release it. They've been sending letters to our old address in Millerton. I never got them. Grady's jaw tightened. But I'll bet someone else did. Mara's face crumpled. My mother, she must have found out. That's why she wants Piper. Not because she cares, because of the money. Cole felt something dark and furious rise in his chest. She tried to have you killed over money. She tried to take Piper. Mara's voice shook with rage and grief. She was willing to murder me for a trust fund. Grady stepped forward, his tone firm. Listen to me. This changes everything. You've got motive now, real motive. We bring this to the judge, show the connection between the trust and the custody claim. It'll gut her case. Will it be enough? Cole demanded. It's a hell of a lot better than what we had before. Grady looked between them. But you need to move fast. The hearing's in 3 weeks, and if she gets wind that you know about the trust, she'll come at you harder. Mara straightened, her hand finding Piper's shoulder. Then we move first. Cole met her eyes and saw something he recognized. The same cold determination he'd felt when he'd pulled the trigger 2 days ago. She wasn't running anymore. She was ready to fight. We tell Crane everything, Cole said, and we make damn sure she doesn't get another chance. Grady nodded. I'll telegraph Denver, get copies of the trust document sent to Crane's office. And I'll keep men watching the roads into town. If anyone else comes looking for you, we'll know. After Grady left, Mara stood on the porch for a long time, staring out at the horizon. Piper had gone inside to feed Brick, leaving Cole and Mara alone in the fading afternoon light. $200,000, Mara said softly. Daniel never told me. Maybe he didn't know, Cole offered. Or maybe he knew exactly what my mother would do if she found out. Mara's voice turned bitter. He was protecting us, even after he died. Cole moved to stand beside her, close but not touching. You don't have to take the money. Mara looked at him sharply. What? If it's the money she wants, take it off the table. Sign it away. Give it to charity, to the church, to anyone but her. Remove the reason she's coming after you. Mara stared at him like he'd grown a second head. That's Piper's future, her education, her security. Piper's future is being alive, Cole said, his voice hard. And as long as that money exists, your mother's going to keep coming. You think one court case is going to stop her? She'll appeal. She'll file motions. She'll hire more men. He turned to face her fully. But if the money's gone, she's got no reason to fight. Mara's breath came fast, her eyes searching his face. You'd really ask me to give up $200,000. I'm asking you to choose your daughter over money you never had. For a long moment, Mara said nothing. Then slowly she nodded. You're right. If it comes down to it, if that's what it takes to keep her safe, I'll do it. Cole felt something settle in his chest, solid and sure. Then we'll make sure the judge knows that you're willing to walk away from a fortune to protect your child. And if my mother still fights? Cole's jaw set. Then we fight harder. That night, after Piper had fallen asleep and the house had gone quiet, Mara found Cole in the barn. He was mending tack by lantern light, his hands moving with the kind of steady focus that came from years of solitary work. Can I ask you something? Mara said from the doorway. Cole looked up. Always. She stepped inside, wrapping her arms around herself against the night chill. That day, when those men came, you moved like, she struggled for the words, like you'd done it before. Cole's hand stilled on the leather. He'd known this conversation was coming, had dreaded it. I have, he said quietly. Mara waited, patient and still. Cole set the tack aside and leaned back against the workbench, his gaze distant. Before I settled here, I rode with a cattle outfit down in Texas. Big operation. We moved herds from the Brazos to the railheads in Kansas. Dangerous work. Rustlers, claim jumpers, men who'd kill you for your horse. He paused, the memories pressing close. I was young, fast, good with a gun, and I didn't hesitate. How many men? Mara asked, her voice soft. Does it matter? It does to me. Cole met her eyes. 7. That I know of. Maybe more. His throat tightened. I told myself it was self-defense, that they drew first, that I didn't have a choice, and most of the time that was true. But there were moments when He stopped, the words catching, when I wanted it, when pulling the trigger felt right. Mara didn't flinch, didn't pull away. She just watched him with those steady, unflinching eyes. After the last time, Cole continued, I quit. Came north. Found this land, built the ranch. Married Sarah. His voice roughened. I thought I could bury it. Thought if I lived quiet and worked hard, I could be someone different. And then we showed up, Mara said. And then you showed up. Cole's hands clenched. And the first time someone threatened you, it all came back, like it had been waiting, like I'd just been pretending. Mara crossed the barn floor and stood in front of him, close enough that he could see the lamplight reflected in her eyes. Do you regret it? She asked. Saving us? No. Do you regret who you had to be to do it? Cole thought about the weight of the revolver in his hand, the cold clarity that had come over him, the way his body had moved without thought, driven by instinct and old, brutal knowledge. I regret that Piper had to see it, he said. But no, I don't regret keeping you alive. Mara reached out and took his hand, her fingers threading through his. My mother sent those men to kill me and take my daughter. You stopped them. That doesn't make you a monster, Cole. That makes you the reason we're still breathing. Doesn't change what I am. No, Mara said, her voice firm. But what you are is a man who's trying, a man who feels guilt, a man who came back to check on us even when everything in him must have been screaming to run. She squeezed his hand. Monsters don't do that. Monsters don't build homes and keep promises and sit up all night with a sick woman because she matters. Cole's chest ached. You don't know me, Mara. I know enough. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something raw and honest. I know you've got darkness in you. I know you've done things that haunt you, but I also know that when it mattered, when we needed someone to stand between us and the worst kind of evil, you didn't hesitate, and that's the man I married. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Cole looked down at their joined hands, then back up at Mara's face. This woman who'd faced down fever, violence, and her own mother's cruelty without breaking. This woman who saw him clearly and still chose to stand beside him. I'm not good at this, he said quietly, at letting people in. Neither am I. Mara's mouth curved, sad and wry. But maybe we can figure it out together. For a long moment, they stood there in the lamplight, the barn creaking softly around them, the night vast and silent beyond the walls. Then Cole lifted his free hand and brushed his thumb across Mara's cheek, gentle and tentative, like he was afraid she'd vanish if he pressed too hard. Mara's breath caught, but she didn't pull away. I'm scared, Cole admitted, the words tearing out of him. That I'll hurt you, that I'll fail you, that I'm not enough. You're enough, Mara whispered. You've always been enough. And then, slowly, achingly slowly, she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, searching, fragile as new ice. Cole froze, his heart hammering against his ribs, every instinct screaming that he didn't deserve this, didn't deserve her. But Mara's hand tightened on his, anchoring him, and he let himself sink into it, into the warmth and the trust and the terrifying, impossible hope. When they finally pulled apart, Mara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. This is real, she said, her voice shaking. Isn't it? It's not just for the court case. Cole's hand cupped her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. It's real. Mara's breath shuddered out, relief and longing tangled together. Good, because I don't think I could go back to pretending. Neither could I. They stood there in the barn, holding each other in the lamplight, and for the first time since Sarah died, Cole felt like he was home. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Elias Crane worked tirelessly, gathering affidavits from neighbors who vouched for Cole's character, financial records that proved the ranch was stable and profitable, and testimony from Marshall Grady about the attack and the connection to Eleanor Hastings. The trust documents arrived from Denver, and Crane built a case around them, showing motive, showing greed, showing a pattern of escalation that painted Eleanor not as a concerned grandmother, but as a calculating predator. Mara and Cole spent hours rehearsing their testimony, going over every detail, every question the opposing lawyer might ask. Crane was blunt about their weaknesses, the newness of the marriage, the fact that Cole and Mara slept in separate rooms, the questions of propriety that a hostile attorney could exploit. If they ask whether the marriage is genuine, Crane said, you'd better have an answer that sounds true. Because if the judge thinks you're running a con, you'll lose Piper and face fraud charges. It is genuine, Mara said firmly. Crane looked between them, his gaze shrewd. Then you'd better make sure it looks that way. That night, after Piper had gone to bed, Mara knocked on the door to Cole's room. He opened it, shirtless and surprised, his hair damp from washing. We need to talk, Mara said. Cole stepped aside and she entered, closing the door behind her. The room was sparse, bed, trunk, washstand, no personal touches. Nothing that said a man lived here. Crane's right, Mara said without preamble. If we're going to convince a judge this marriage is real, we can't keep living like strangers. Cole's throat worked. What are you suggesting? Mara met his eyes. I'm suggesting we share a room, that we act like a married couple in every way that matters, at least where anyone can see. And where they can't? Mara's cheeks flushed, but her voice stayed steady. That's up to us. But Cole, if we're doing this, if we're really fighting for Piper together, then I need to know you're all in, not just for the court, for us. Cole crossed the small room and stood in front of her, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. I'm all in, he said. I have been since the day I found you. Mara's eyes shone. Then move your things into my room, tonight. Cole did. They rearranged the furniture to make space, Cole's trunk beside the wardrobe, his clothes hung next to Mara's, his boots lined up by the door. Piper, watching from the hallway with Brick in her arms, grinned so wide it split her face. Does this mean you're really married now? She asked. Mara knelt down, her hands gentle on Piper's shoulders. We've been really married since the day we said our vows. But yes, this means Cole is staying. Good, Piper said solemnly. I like it better when he's here. That night, Cole and Mara lay side by side in the bed that had once been hers alone. A careful distance between them, both staring at the ceiling in the dark. This is strange, Mara whispered. Yeah, Cole agreed. But good strange. Yeah. Mara turned her head to look at him. Cole? Thank you. For everything. Cole reached across the space between them and found her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. You don't have to thank me, he said. This is where I want to be. Mara's grip tightened, and they fell asleep like that, hands clasped, hearts guarded, but opening, two broken people learning to be whole. 3 days before the hearing, a telegram arrived. Cole was in the barn when Mara came running, her face white, the paper clutched in her hand. What is it? Cole demanded, dropping the shovel and crossing to her. Mara's voice shook. It's from Crane. Eleanor Hastings has filed a motion to have the hearing moved to Harbor City. She's claiming that a frontier judge can't be impartial, that the case needs to be heard in a city court with proper legal oversight. Cole's blood went cold. Can she do that? Crane says the judge in Redstone denied it, but she's appealing, and if the appeal goes through... Mara's voice broke. We'd have to travel to Harbor City, on her territory, with her lawyers, her money, her influence. Cole's jaw set. Then we make sure the appeal doesn't go through. How? We show up in Redstone ready to fight. We put everything on the table, the trust, the attacks, the fact that she's willing to kill for money. We make it so clear, so undeniable, that no judge in their right mind would hand Piper over. Mara nodded, her fear hardening into resolve. And if that's not enough? Cole pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, solid and sure. Then we disappear. Take Piper and run so far Eleanor Hastings never finds us. Mara pulled back, her eyes wide. You do that? Give up the ranch? Everything you've built? In a heartbeat, Cole said, and meant it. You and Piper. You're what matters. Not land. Not legacy. You. Mara's face crumpled, and she buried her head against his chest, her shoulders shaking. Cole held her, his hand stroking her hair, his heart breaking and mending all at once. "We're going to win," he said quietly. "I promise you, we're going to win." The day before they were set to leave for Redstone, Cole woke before dawn to the sound of hooves. He was out of bed in seconds, pulling on his pants and grabbing his revolver. Mara stirred, her eyes snapping open. "What is it?" she whispered. "Stay here," Cole said, and moved to the window. 4 riders approached the house, silhouetted against the gray pre-dawn light. They rode slow, deliberate, and Cole's instincts screamed danger. He crossed to the door, checked the load in his revolver, and stepped onto the porch. The riders reined in 20 feet from the house. The leader, a tall man in a long coat, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, raised a hand in a gesture that might have been peaceful if Cole believed in peace anymore. "Mr. Ransom," the man called, "we're not here for trouble." "Then state your business and move on," Cole said, his voice flat. The man dismounted, his movements careful and measured. "My name is Victor Kane. I work for Mrs. Eleanor Hastings." Cole's finger moved to the trigger. "You've got 5 seconds to get back on that horse." "I'm here to make you an offer." Kane's voice was smooth, practiced. "Mrs. Hastings is willing to drop the custody case. She'll sign away all rights to the child, leave you and Mrs. Ransom in peace, and you'll never hear from her again." Cole didn't lower the gun. "In exchange for what?" "The trust fund. Sign it over to Mrs. Hastings, and this ends today." Behind Cole, the door opened. Mara stepped onto the porch, her face pale, but composed, Piper clutching her hand. "No," Mara said, her voice ringing clear. "Absolutely not." Kane's gaze shifted to her, his expression almost pitying. "Mrs. Ransom, be reasonable. $200,000 is a great deal of money, but your daughter's safety, her future, surely that's worth more." "It is," Mara said, "which is why I'm not giving you a single cent." Kane's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Hastings anticipated you might say that. She asked me to remind you that the courts can be unpredictable. Judges can be swayed. And accidents, well, accidents happen all the time on the frontier." Cole's revolver came up, aimed directly at Kane's chest. "Is that a threat?" Kane raised his hand slowly. "It's a statement of fact. Mrs. Hastings is a powerful woman. She has resources you can't imagine. And she will not stop until she gets what she wants, one way or another." "Then she's going to be disappointed," Cole said, his voice like iron, "because we're not giving her Piper. We're not giving her the money. And if she sends anyone else to this ranch, they'll leave in a box." Kane's smile was cold. "You're making a mistake." "No," Mara said, stepping forward. "My mother made the mistake. She thought she could buy me, threaten me, break me, but I'm not the girl she disowned, and I'm not alone anymore." She looked at Cole, her eyes fierce. "Tell her the answer is no. Today, tomorrow, forever." Kane studied them both for a long moment. Then he tipped his hat, climbed back into the saddle, and rode off with his men, disappearing into the breaking dawn. Cole and Mara stood on the porch, watching until the dust settled and the horizon was clear. "That was a declaration of war," Cole said quietly. "I know." Mara's hand found his, gripping tight. "But we're ready." Cole looked down at Piper, who stared up at him with those wide, solemn eyes. "Are you scared?" the girl asked. Cole crouched down, meeting her gaze. "Yeah, I am." "Me too." Piper's chin lifted. "But Mama says brave people are scared. They just don't let it stop them." Cole's throat tightened. He looked at Mara, who smiled through tears, and then back at Piper. "Your mama's right," he said. "And tomorrow, we're going to be the bravest people in that courtroom." Piper nodded, serious as a judge herself. "Okay." They went inside, packed their bags, and prepared for the fight of their lives. The ride to Redstone took 2 days through country that turned from open grassland to pine-covered hills, the mountains rising in the distance like sentinels. Cole drove the wagon steady and careful, Mara beside him with Piper bundled between them in a wool blanket. They stopped at dusk each night, making camp in clearings where Cole could see the approaches, where nothing could come at them unseen. Mara didn't sleep much. Cole could feel her restlessness, the way she startled at every crack of a branch, every distant sound. On the second night, after Piper had finally drifted off, Mara sat by the fire with her arms wrapped around her knees, staring into the flames. What are you thinking? Cole asked, his voice low. That I don't know what I'll do if we lose. Cole moved closer, settling beside her on the log they'd dragged near the fire. We won't. You can't promise that. No, Cole admitted. But I can promise I won't let her take Piper without a fight that'll be remembered. Mara looked at him, the firelight painting her face in golden shadow. I keep thinking about what Kane said, about accidents, about how far my mother's willing to go. Then we make sure she knows we'll go farther. Cole? Mara's voice dropped to something raw. If it comes down to it, if the judge rules against us, I need you to promise me something. Anything. You take Piper and you run. You get her somewhere safe, somewhere Eleanor can't reach. Cole's chest tightened. And leave you? If that's what it takes. Mara's eyes were fierce, unwavering. She wants the money, not me. If I'm here, if I make noise, if I fight her in court over and over, it'll buy you time. Time to disappear. Mara, promise me. Her hand gripped his, desperate and strong. Promise me you'll protect her, no matter what. Cole looked at this woman, this mother who'd stood between her daughter and death more than once, who'd faced down hired killers and her own blood without flinching, and felt something crack open inside him. I promise, he said. But it's not going to come to that. Because we're going to walk out of that courthouse together. All three of us. Mara's breath shuddered out, and she leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Cole wrapped his arm around her, holding her close while the fire burned low and the stars wheeled overhead. I love you, Mara whispered into the darkness. Cole's heart stopped, then started again, harder, faster, like something long dormant had surged back to life. Say that again, he said, his voice rough. Mara lifted her head, meeting his eyes. I love you, Cole Ransom. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you carried me into your house half dead, maybe when you stood between us and those men, maybe when you promised to fight for us even though you barely knew us. But it's real, and I needed you to know before, her voice caught, before whatever happens tomorrow. Cole cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. I love you too, and I'm not losing you, not to Eleanor, not to anyone. He kissed her then, fierce and claiming and full of every promise he didn't have words for. Mara kissed him back with the same desperation, her hands fisting in his shirt, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them, two people who'd been broken and alone finding something whole in each other. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Mara's smile was tremulous but real. We're going to be all right, she said, like she was trying to convince herself. Yeah, Cole said. We are. They reached Redstone late the next afternoon. The town was bigger than Benton, with brick buildings, paved streets, and a courthouse that loomed at the end of Main Street like a monument to justice or judgment, depending on which side you were on. Cole secured rooms at a modest hotel near the courthouse, paid for a week in advance, and tried not to think about what would happen if they needed more time than that. Elias Crane met them in the hotel dining room that evening, his face grave and his leather satchel bulging with documents. The hearing's set for 9 tomorrow morning, Crane said without preamble. Judge Whitmore presiding. He's fair, but he's also conservative. He'll want to see stability, propriety, and clear evidence that Piper's better off with you than with her grandmother. We've got that, Cole said. I know, but Eleanor's lawyer is a man named Silas Cartwright. He's one of the best in the state. Expensive, ruthless, and very good at making juries and judges see things his way. Crane pulled a stack of papers from his satchel. He's going to argue that a wealthy, established home in Harbor City with access to the finest schools and medical care is objectively better for a child than a frontier ranch. He's going to question the legitimacy of your marriage, and he's going to paint Mara as a woman who married for convenience, and Cole as a man with a violent past. Mara's face hardened. Let him try. He will. And he'll have ammunition. Crane's gaze shifted to Cole. I got the records from Texas, the cattle outfit you rode with, the men you killed. Cole's stomach dropped. How? Cartwright's been digging. He's got affidavits from men who worked with you, witnesses who will testify that you were known as a gunfighter, that you had a reputation. That was 15 years ago, Cole said, his voice tight. Doesn't matter. He's going to use it to argue that you're dangerous, that Piper's not safe with you. Mara's hand found Cole's under the table, squeezing hard. Then we tell the truth, that Cole used those skills to save us, that without him Piper and I would be dead. We will, Crane said, but be prepared. It's going to get ugly. That night, Cole couldn't sleep. He stood at the window of their hotel room watching the empty street below, his mind churning through every possible outcome, every argument, every way this could go wrong. Behind him, Mara stirred in the bed. "Come back," she said softly. Cole turned. She was propped up on one elbow, her hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes dark and worried in the lamplight. "I keep thinking about what Crane said," Cole admitted, "about them using my past against us. Your past is part of what saved us. Maybe, but to a judge who's never been shot at, who's never had to choose between killing or being killed, it just looks like violence, like I'm someone who should be locked up, not raising a child." Mara sat up fully, the blanket pooling around her waist. "Cole, look at me." He did. "You are not the man you were 15 years ago," she said. "You're not even the man you were 3 months ago. You're someone who saved 2 strangers, who opened your home, who married me to protect my daughter. That's who the judge needs to see, not some ghost from Texas. And if that's not enough," Mara's expression turned fierce, "then we make it enough. Together." Cole crossed to the bed and sat beside her, his hand finding hers. "I'm scared, Mara. Not of the judge, not of Eleanor, but of failing you. You won't. You don't know that." "Yes," Mara said, her voice breaking. "I do. Because you've never failed us yet. Not once. Not when I was dying of fever. Not when those men came. Not when you had every reason to turn us away and you chose to stay. You don't know how to fail us, Cole. It's not in you." Cole's throat closed up. He pulled Mara into his arms, holding her tight, and felt her arms wrap around him just as fiercely. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said into her hair, "I want you to know these months with you and Piper have been the best of my life." Mara pulled back just enough to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "Mine too." They lay down together, still clothed, still holding each other, and eventually sleep came, fitful and shallow, but enough. The courtroom was smaller than Cole expected, all dark wood and high windows that let in slanted bars of morning light. Judge Whitmore sat behind an elevated bench, a man in his 60s with steel gray hair and a face that gave nothing away. Eleanor Hastings sat at the opposing table with Silas Cartwright beside her. She was tall, silver-haired, dressed in black silk that probably cost more than Cole's entire ranch. Her eyes were cold, calculating, and when they landed on Mara, something like disgust flickered across her face. Mara didn't flinch. She sat between Cole and Crane, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap, every inch the composed woman Cole knew she was. Piper sat in the gallery behind them with a woman from the church who'd agreed to watch her during the hearing. The girl's eyes were wide, solemn, tracking every movement. Judge Whitmore gavelled the court to order. "This is a custody hearing regarding the minor child Piper Vale," he said, his voice carrying through the room. "Mrs. Eleanor Hastings is petitioning for custody on the grounds that the child's current living situation is unsuitable. Mrs. Mara Ransom and Mr. Cole Ransom are contesting. Mr. Cartwright, you may proceed." Cartwright rose, every movement polished and deliberate. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed, with a voice like honey over steel. "Your Honor, this case is quite simple. A young child has lost her father and finds herself in the care of a mother who, through no fault of her own, lacks the resources to provide a stable, secure future. Mrs. Hastings, the child's grandmother, is a woman of considerable means and standing. She can offer Piper the finest education, medical care, and opportunities that a frontier ranch simply cannot match." He gestured to Eleanor. "She seeks only to do right by her granddaughter." Crane stood. "Your Honor, if I may—" "You'll have your turn, Mr. Crane." Judge Whitmore's gaze was neutral. "Continue, Mr. Cartwright." Cartwright smiled. "Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to call Mrs. Eleanor Hastings to the stand." Eleanor rose with practiced grace and took her seat in the witness box. She placed one hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and settled into the chair like she owned it. Cartwright approached her with deference. Mrs. Hastings, can you describe your relationship with your granddaughter? I'm ashamed to say I haven't had the opportunity to build one, Eleanor said, her voice cultured and sorrowful. When my daughter married against my wishes, we became estranged. I regret that deeply. But when I learned of her husband's death, I immediately sought to reunite with her and meet my granddaughter. Sadly, by the time I located them, Mara had already... She paused delicately. Attached herself to Mr. Ransom. Attached herself, Cartwright repeated. Can you elaborate? I believe the marriage was one of convenience. A desperate woman, alone and without resources, seeking security through any means available. Mara's hands clenched under the table. Cole's jaw tightened. And you believe Piper would be better served in your care? Cartwright prompted. Without question, I can provide her with the finest tutors, access to society, a future befitting her station, on a frontier ranch. Eleanor's mouth twisted. She'll grow up uneducated, isolated, exposed to violence and hardship. That's no life for a child. Thank you, Mrs. Hastings. Cartwright returned to his seat, looking satisfied. Judge Whitmore gestured to Crane. Your witness. Crane stood, his expression unreadable. He approached Eleanor slowly, deliberately, like a man measuring his target. Mrs. Hastings, he began, you mentioned that you became estranged from your daughter when she married against your wishes. What were your objections to her husband, Daniel Vale? Eleanor's expression tightened. He was common, unsuitable. I wanted better for Mara. By common, you mean he wasn't wealthy. He lacked refinement, prospects, breeding. So you disowned your daughter for marrying a working man. Eleanor's eyes flashed. I gave her a choice. She made hers. And you had no contact with her for 6 years, correct? Correct. No letters, no financial support, no interest in her welfare. She made it clear she didn't want my involvement. Crane nodded slowly. And yet, 6 months after Daniel Vale's death, you suddenly developed a deep concern for your granddaughter's well-being. Why the change of heart? Eleanor's smile was thin. A grandmother's love doesn't require explanation. Doesn't it? Crane pulled a document from his satchel. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence a copy of the trust established for Piper Vale by her paternal grandfather. The principal amount is $200,000, to be released upon Piper's 5th birthday, or in the event of her father's death, whichever comes first. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Whitmore's eyebrows lifted. Cartwright shot to his feet. Objection. Relevance. I'm establishing motive, Your Honor, Crane said calmly. I'll allow it. Continue, Mr. Crane. Crane turned back to Eleanor. Mrs. Hastings, when did you first learn about this trust? Eleanor's composure cracked, just slightly. I don't see how that's relevant. Answer the question, please. Several months ago. Before or after you filed for custody? Eleanor's silence was damning. Let me rephrase, Crane said. You learned that your granddaughter was the beneficiary of a $200,000 trust, and then you suddenly decided to seek custody. Is that correct? My concern for Piper has nothing to do with money. Then you won't mind if Mrs. Ransom signs the trust over to a charitable foundation, removing it from the equation entirely. The courtroom went dead silent. Eleanor's face turned to stone. That money belongs to Piper, and Piper belongs with her mother, Crane shot back. Unless, of course, your interest in custody has more to do with controlling that trust than caring for the child. Cartwright was on his feet. Your Honor, this is speculation. It's cross-examination, Judge Whitmore said sharply. Sit down, Mr. Cartwright. He looked at Eleanor. Mrs. Hastings, answer the question. Would you still seek custody if the trust were removed from consideration? Eleanor's mouth opened, closed. Her eyes darted to Cartwright, who gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. She stopped. I believe Piper deserves the best care possible. That's not an answer, the judge said. Eleanor's mask slipped. For just a moment, Cole saw the truth beneath, cold, calculating, furious. Then she composed herself. I would still seek custody, she said, but I would expect the trust to be managed responsibly. Crane smiled. By you. By someone with experience. Someone like the men you hired to attack Mrs. Ransom and her daughter 3 weeks ago? The courtroom erupted. Cartwright shot up, his voice thundering. Objection! That's an outrageous accusation with no foundation. I have foundation, Your Honor. Crane pulled another document. Sworn testimony from Marshal Thomas Grady of Benton detailing the attack on Mrs. Ransom's wagon and a subsequent assault at Mr. Ransom's ranch. 3 men, hired through a middleman connected to a law firm in Cheyenne, a firm that handles Mrs. Hastings' legal affairs. Judge Whitmore's face darkened. Is this true? The men were arrested and questioned, Crane continued. They confessed to being hired to retrieve the child, by force, if necessary. Eleanor's voice cut through the chaos, icy and controlled. I have no knowledge of any such arrangement. If someone acted on my behalf without my authorization, that's a matter for the police, not this court. Convenient, Crane said. Just like it's convenient that Daniel Vale died in a robbery 6 months ago. A robbery that was never solved. A robbery that happened 3 weeks after the trust became active. Mara gasped. Cole's blood turned to ice. Cartwright was livid. Your Honor, this is wild conjecture. Is it? Crane turned to face the judge. Daniel Vale was killed in what authorities called a botched robbery, but nothing was taken, his wagon wasn't touched, and the only witness, a man who's since disappeared, gave a description that matches one of the men arrested at the Ransom Ranch. Judge Whitmore's gavel came down hard. Mr. Crane, do you have evidence linking Mrs. Hastings to Daniel Vale's death? Not yet, Your Honor, but I have enough to warrant an investigation. The judge's expression was granite. This hearing is in recess. I want both parties in my chambers, now. The judge's chambers were austere, shelves of law books, a single window overlooking the street, and a desk scarred with decades of use. Judge Whitmore sat behind it, his fingers steepled, his expression unreadable. Eleanor and Cartwright stood on one side, Mara, Cole, and Crane on the other. Mr. Crane, the judge said, his voice measured, you've made serious allegations. If you can't substantiate them, you're flirting with contempt. I understand, Your Honor, but the pattern is clear. Patterns aren't proof. The judge's gaze shifted to Eleanor. Mrs. Hastings, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you have any involvement in the attacks on your daughter? Eleanor's voice was cold. Absolutely not. Did you have any knowledge of them before they occurred? No. Judge Whitmore studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Mara. Mrs. Ransom, what do you want? Mara's voice was steady. I want my daughter to stay with me, and I want my mother to leave us alone. And the trust? Mara looked at Cole. He gave the smallest nod. I'll sign it away, Mara said. Every cent. To a children's hospital, an orphanage. I don't care, as long as my daughter is safe. Eleanor's composure finally shattered. You'd throw away her future out of spite. Out of love, Mara cut in, her voice ringing. Something you've never understood. Judge Whitmore raised a hand. Enough. He looked at Crane. If Mrs. Ransom is willing to relinquish the trust, does that satisfy your client? Only if Mrs. Hastings withdraws her petition and agrees to stay away from the family. Cartwright started to speak, but Eleanor silenced him with a look. Her eyes locked on Mara, cold and venomous. You'll regret this, Eleanor said quietly. I already regret you, Mara replied. Judge Whitmore's gavel came down on his desk. We're done here. I'll issue a ruling by end of day. He looked at Eleanor. And Mrs. Hastings, if I find even a shred of evidence connecting you to those attacks, I'll see you charged. Are we clear? Eleanor's smile was brittle. Perfectly. They filed out of the chambers. Cole kept his hand on Mara's back, steady and grounding. Piper ran to them the moment they entered the hallway, her small arms wrapping around Mara's waist. Is it over? The girl asked. Not yet, Mara said, stroking her hair. Soon. They returned to the hotel to wait. Hours crawled by. Cole paced the room like a caged animal, while Mara sat by the window, holding Piper in her lap, her face drawn and pale. At 4 p.m, a messenger arrived with a sealed envelope. Crane opened it, read it, and closed his eyes briefly. We won, he said. Mara's breath left her in a rush. What? Judge Whitmore ruled in your favor. Custody remains with you. Eleanor's petition is denied. And there's more. He's ordered an investigation into the attacks. Eleanor's being detained for questioning. Mara stood, swaying slightly. Cole caught her, and she turned into his arms, sobbing. It's over, she whispered. It's really over. Cole held her tight, his own eyes burning. Yeah, it is. Piper looked up at them both, her face solemn. Can we go home now? Cole crouched down, meeting her eyes. Yes, sweetheart. We can go home. But home would have to wait. That night, as they prepared to leave Redstone, a man appeared at their hotel room door. He was young, nervous, and wore the uniform of the local police. Mr. Ransom, Mrs. Ransom, he said, I need you to come with me. There's been an incident. Cole's hand went to his gun. What kind of incident? Your daughter's been taken. The world stopped. Mara's scream tore through the hallway. Cole caught her as her knees buckled, his own heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. Where? Cole said, his voice deadly calm. Where is she? The officer swallowed hard. We think Mrs. Hastings took her. A witness saw a woman matching her description leaving the Grandview Hotel with a child an hour ago. They're heading east. Cole was moving before the officer finished speaking. He grabbed his coat, his gun, and looked at Mara. Stay here, he said. Like hell. Mara's face was white, but her voice was steel. That's my daughter. Mara, I'm coming. Cole saw the resolve in her eyes and knew better than to argue. He looked at the officer. Get us horses. Now. 20 minutes later, they were riding hard through the darkness, following a trail that grew colder with every passing second. And somewhere ahead, in the night, Eleanor Hastings had Piper. The horses tore through the night, hooves pounding against packed earth, breath steaming in the cold air. Cole rode like a man possessed, his body low over the gelding's neck, every muscle coiled with fury and fear. Mara matched him stride for stride, her face set in grim determination, her hands white-knuckled on the reins. Marshal Grady and 2 deputies rode with them, following the eastern road out of Redstone. The officer who'd brought the news had said Eleanor was heading for the railroad depot in Cressmont, a town 30 miles away where she could board a train and disappear with Piper into the vastness of the country. They couldn't let that happen. Cole's mind raced through scenarios, each one worse than the last. Eleanor was desperate now, cornered and dangerous. She'd lost the court case, lost her respectable veneer, and if the investigation tied her to Daniel's death or the attacks, she'd face prison. Taking Piper wasn't about love or even money anymore. It was about control, about winning, about making sure Mara suffered. How far to Cressmont? Mara shouted over the wind. 20 miles, Grady called back. Maybe less. Train doesn't leave until midnight. We've got time. We'd better, Cole said, his voice dark. They rode in silence after that. The only sounds, the thunder of hooves and the ragged breathing of pushed horses. The moon was a sliver overhead, barely enough light to see by, and twice they had to slow to avoid losing the road in the darkness. Cole's thoughts kept circling back to Piper, to her small, serious face, to the way she'd asked if they could go home, her voice full of hope and trust. He'd promised to keep her safe. He'd looked her in the eye and promised, and he'd failed. Mara's voice cut through his spiral. She's alive, Cole. He looked at her, startled. Eleanor needs her alive, Mara continued, her voice hard and certain. For leverage, for the trust, for whatever twisted plan she's concocted, Piper's alive, and we're going to get her back. Cole wanted to believe her, needed to, but the darkness in him, the part that had seen too much death, too much cruelty, whispered that alive didn't mean unharmed, that Eleanor Hastings was capable of things even he couldn't imagine. When we find her, Cole said quietly, I need you to let me handle it. Mara's jaw set. She's my daughter. I know, but if this goes bad, if Eleanor's got men with her, if she's armed, I can't be worrying about you and Piper both. I need you to trust me. Mara stared at him for a long moment, the wind whipping her hair across her face. Then she nodded, once, sharp. I trust you. But Cole, if she's hurt Piper, then there won't be enough of her left to stand trial, Cole said, and meant every word. They reached Crestmont just before 11, the horses lathered and blowing hard. The town was small, barely more than a main street and a scattering of buildings clustered around the railroad depot. Lamplight spilled from a few windows, but most of the town was dark, asleep, or indifferent to whatever dramas played out in the night. The depot sat at the far end of the street, a squat wooden building with a platform and a water tower. A single train waited on the tracks, steam hissing from its engine, a few passengers visible through the lit windows of the cars. Grady reined in, his hand raised. "Hold! We don't go charging in blind." "The hell we don't," Cole said, already dismounting. Grady grabbed his arm. "Listen to me. If Eleanor's in there and we spook her, she could run. Or worse, she could use the child as a shield. We need to be smart about this." Cole's every instinct screamed to kick down the depot door and tear the place apart until he found Piper. But Grady was right. Recklessness would get Piper killed. "What do you suggest?" Mara asked, her voice tight. "Two of us go in quiet through the front, check the waiting room, the ticket office. The rest circle around back in case she tries to bolt." Grady looked at Cole. "You and me, front. Deputies, take the rear. Mrs. "Ransom, I'm going in," Mara said, brooking no argument. Grady's mouth pressed into a line, but he nodded. "Stay behind us, and if shooting starts, you get down and stay down." They moved fast and low, approaching the depot from the side where shadows pooled thick. Cole's hand rested on his revolver, his senses sharpened to a razor's edge. He could hear the murmur of voices inside, the hiss of steam, the clatter of a luggage cart somewhere in the distance. Grady tested the door. Unlocked. He pushed it open slowly, and they slipped inside. The waiting room was small, dimly lit by oil lamps, with benches along the walls and a ticket window at the far end. A handful of passengers sat scattered around, a man in a bowler hat reading a newspaper, an elderly couple dozing against each other, a woman with a crying infant. No Eleanor, no Piper. Cole's chest tightened. "She's not here." "Ticket office," Grady said, moving toward the window. The clerk behind the glass was a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles and the look of someone who wanted to be anywhere else. He glanced up as Grady approached, his expression wary. "Help you, Marshal?" "I'm looking for a woman, 50s, well-dressed, traveling with a young girl, dark hair, 5 years old. You see anyone like that?" The clerk's eyes shifted. "Maybe." "Maybe isn't good enough," Cole growled, stepping forward. "Where are they?" The clerk swallowed. "Look, I don't want trouble." Grady leaned in. "Then don't make it." "Where's the woman?" "She bought 2 tickets, first-class berth on the eastbound. Left about 20 minutes ago. Said she and her granddaughter needed privacy, paid extra for a private car." Cole's blood turned to ice. "Which car?" "Third from the engine, but listen, train leaves in 10 minutes. You can't just—" Cole was already moving. He crossed the waiting room in 3 strides and hit the platform at a run, Mara and Grady right behind him. The train stretched ahead of them, a dark metal serpent hissing steam into the night. Third car from the engine. Cole counted as he ran, 1, 2, 3, and grabbed the railing, hauling himself up. The corridor inside was narrow, lit by dim electric bulbs, doors on either side leading to private berths. Cole moved fast and silent, checking each one. Empty. Empty. Locked. He stopped at the third door, his hand on the latch. It was locked from the inside. "Piper," he called, his voice low and urgent. "Piper, are you in there?" Silence. Then, faint and muffled. "Cole?" Relief and rage flooded through him in equal measure. "I'm here, sweetheart. Is your grandmother with you?" She said we're going on a trip." Piper's voice was scared, trembling. "I want Mama." "I know. Mama's right here. We're going to get you out." Cole looked at Grady. "Break it down." "Wait." Grady moved to the door, his voice rising. "Mrs. Hastings, this is Marshal Grady. Open the door. There's no way out of this." A pause. Then Eleanor's voice, cool and controlled. "Marshal, I'm simply traveling with my granddaughter. There's no law against that." "There is when it's kidnapping," Grady shot back. "The judge awarded custody to Mrs. Ransom. You've got no legal right to that child." "Legal rights are subject to interpretation." Cole's hand moved to his revolver. Open the door, Eleanor. Last chance. Or what, Mr. Ransom? You'll shoot through it and risk hitting Piper? Eleanor's laugh was cold. I don't think so. Mara pushed past Cole and Grady, her face white with fury. Mother, let her go, please. You've lost. The court ruled against you. The police are investigating you. Taking Piper won't change any of that. Won't it? Eleanor's voice sharpened. I still have leverage, Mara. I have your daughter. And unless you want her to disappear into a world you'll never reach, you'll do exactly as I say. What do you want? Mara's voice broke. The trust. Signed over to me, legally, witnessed and notarized. You do that, and I'll consider returning Piper. Cole's jaw clenched. You're lying. You'll take the money and run with her anyway. Perhaps, but do you really want to take that chance? Grady's hand moved to his gun. Mrs. Hastings, step away from the door. You're under arrest for kidnapping, conspiracy, and suspicion of... The train whistle screamed. The car lurched forward. Cole swore and grabbed the railing as the train began to move. Slowly at first, then faster. Through the window, he saw the platform sliding away, the depot receding into the darkness. She bribed the engineer, Grady said, his face grim. She's making a run for it. Cole didn't hesitate. He stepped back, raised his boot, and slammed it into the door. The wood cracked, but held. He kicked again, harder, and the frame splintered. One more kick, and the door burst inward. The berth was small, luxuriously appointed with velvet curtains and polished wood. Eleanor stood in the center, one hand gripping Piper's arm, the other holding a small Derringer pistol aimed directly at the child's head. Piper's eyes were wide with terror, tears streaming down her face. Mama, don't move, Eleanor said, her voice deadly calm. Any of you, or I'll pull the trigger. Cole froze, his hand hovering over his gun. Mara made a choked sound, her hand flying to her mouth. Grady raised his hand slowly, his voice steady. Mrs. Hastings, think about what you're doing. You shoot that child. There's no coming back from it. You'll hang. I'll hang anyway if your investigation proceeds. Eleanor's smile was brittle, unhinged. At least this way, Mara knows what it feels like to lose everything. This isn't about Mara, Cole said, his voice low and dangerous. This is about you, about control, about not being able to stand that your daughter chose her own life. Her life was a mistake, Eleanor spat, marrying beneath her, raising a child in squalor. She threw away everything I built for her. You built nothing for me, Mara said, her voice shaking with rage. You built a prison, and when I chose freedom, you disowned me. You don't get to come back now and pretend you care. Eleanor's hand tightened on the gun. I cared enough to find out about the trust, to make sure Piper would have opportunities. You cared about the money, Cole cut in. That's all you've ever cared about. And now you're holding a gun to a 5-year-old's head because you can't accept that you lost. I haven't lost. Eleanor's eyes glittered. Not yet. The train was picking up speed now, the wheels clacking faster, the countryside blurring past the windows. Cole's mind raced. The berth was small, barely 10 feet across. Eleanor had her back to the far wall, Piper in front of her as a shield. If Cole drew, if he tried to shoot, the margin for error was razor thin. One flinch, one miscalculation, and Piper would die. But if he didn't act, Eleanor would disappear with her. And Cole had seen enough desperation to know that cornered animals did unpredictable things. He met Piper's eyes. The girl was terrified, but she was watching him with that same solemn focus she'd had the day he found her in the basin. Waiting, trusting. Cole made his choice. Eleanor, he said, his voice dropping to something almost conversational. You're right, you haven't lost yet, because you've still got one card to play. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. What card? Me. Cole slowly raised his hands, palms out. Let Piper go. Take me instead. Cole, no, Mara started, but Cole silenced her with a look. I'm worth more to you than a child, Cole continued. I've got money, land, connections. You want leverage? You want something to negotiate with? Take me. Eleanor studied him, calculating. Why would you do that? Because she's 5 years old, and I'm not. Cole took a slow step forward. Let her go to her mother. Keep the gun on me. When we reach the next station, you let me off with you. Mara and the marshal stay on the train. You get time to run, to disappear, to do whatever you need to do. And you expect me to believe you'll just go quietly? I expect you to believe I'd die before I let you hurt that child. Cole's voice was flat, absolute. So yeah, I'll go quietly. But only if Piper walks out of here unharmed. For a long, agonizing moment, Eleanor said nothing. Then she shoved Piper forward. The girl stumbled, and Mara lunged, catching her, pulling her into a fierce embrace. Piper buried her face in her mother's shoulder, sobbing. Eleanor's gun swung to Cole. "Come here." Cole moved slowly, his hand still raised. He crossed the small space and stopped 2 feet from Eleanor, close enough to see the desperation in her eyes, the way her hand trembled just slightly on the derringer. "Good," Eleanor said. "Now," Cole struck. His hand shot out faster than thought, clamping around Eleanor's wrist and twisting hard. The derringer fired, the shot deafening in the small space, the bullet burying itself in the ceiling. Cole wrenched the gun free and threw Eleanor against the wall in one fluid motion. She hit hard and crumpled, gasping. Grady was on her in seconds, flipping her onto her stomach and snapping handcuffs around her wrists. "Eleanor Hastings, you're under arrest!" Eleanor's scream cut him off, wild, incoherent, the sound of something breaking. She thrashed against Grady's hold, her face contorted with rage and madness. "You've ruined everything, everything! That money was mine, mine!" "It was never yours," Mara said quietly. Eleanor's eyes locked on her daughter, venomous and hateful. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure—" "You'll make sure of nothing," Grady said, hauling her to her feet. "You're done." Cole crossed to Mara and Piper, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Mara looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, and reached for him with one hand while the other stayed wrapped around her daughter. Cole took her hand and sank to his knees, pulling them both into his arms. "It's over," he whispered into Mara's hair. "It's really over." Mara sobbed against his shoulder, her whole body shaking. Piper clung to both of them, her small voice muffled but fierce. "I knew you'd come. I knew it." The train slowed as they approached the next station, a tiny outpost barely more than a platform and a water tower. Grady hauled Eleanor off the train, the deputies taking custody of her, and the 3 of them, Cole, Mara, and Piper, stood on the platform watching as the law took Eleanor Hastings away. She didn't look back. They returned to Redstone the next morning, exhausted and hollowed out but intact. Judge Whitmore met them at his chambers, his expression grave. "I've reviewed the events of last night," he said, "and I've made my final ruling. Custody of Piper Vale remains permanently with Mara Ransom. Eleanor Hastings will face criminal charges for kidnapping, attempted murder, and conspiracy. The investigation into Daniel Vale's death has been reopened, and evidence suggests Mrs. Hastings may have had involvement." Mara's breath shuddered out. "What about the trust?" "That's up to you," the judge said. "You can claim it for Piper. You can sign it away. The choice is yours." Mara looked at Cole. He nodded, once. She turned back to the judge. "I want it donated. To the Territorial Orphans Fund. Every cent. In Daniel's name." Judge Whitmore's expression softened. "I'll see it done." They left the courthouse into bright morning sunlight. Piper held Cole's hand on one side, Mara's on the other, and for the first time in months, the weight pressing on all of them lifted. "Can we go home now?" Piper asked. "For real this time?" Cole looked at Mara. She smiled. Tired, but real. "Yeah," Cole said. "We can go home." The ride back to the ranch took 3 days. They went slow, stopping to rest, to let the horses graze, to sit by the fire at night and just breathe. Piper chattered about Brick the cat, about the barn, about whether the chickens had missed her. Mara held Cole's hand across the firelight and didn't let go. On the last night before they reached home, after Piper had fallen asleep wrapped in blankets, Mara turned to Cole. "I keep thinking about what you said to Eleanor," she said quietly, "about trading yourself for Piper. I meant it. I know. And it terrified me." Mara's hand tightened on his. "Promise me you won't do that again. Promise me you won't throw your life away, not even for us." Cole looked at her. This woman who'd walked through fire and come out stronger, who'd faced down her own mother and chosen love over money, who trusted him with the most precious thing in her life. I can't promise that, he said honestly. Because if it came down to you or Piper dying or me dying, I'd choose me every time. That's not negotiable. Mara's eyes filled. Cole, but, he continued, pulling her close, I can promise I'll fight like hell to make sure it never comes to that. I can promise I'll be smart, careful, and do everything in my power to come home to you, both of you. Mara pressed her forehead against his. That's all I can ask. They sat there in the firelight, wrapped in each other, while the stars wheeled overhead and the future stretched out before them, uncertain but theirs. When they finally crested the rise and saw the ranch spread out below, house, barn, corrals, the land rolling away to the mountains, Cole felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for years. This was home. Not because of the land or the buildings, but because of the people who'd filled it with light. Piper let out a whoop and urged her pony forward, racing down the slope toward the barn where Brick would be waiting. Mara laughed, the sound bright and free, and followed at a canter. Cole sat for a moment longer, watching them. Then he touched his heels to the gelding's sides and rode down to meet them. The house welcomed them back with the smell of dust and wood smoke and the faint scent of lavender from the sachets Sarah had made years ago. Cole built a fire in the stove while Mara unpacked. Piper found Brick curled up in the hayloft and carried him inside, the cat purring so loud it sounded like a small engine. That night, they sat together at the kitchen table, the three of them and one orange cat, eating beans and cornbread and fresh bread Mara had baked that afternoon. Piper told a rambling story about a dream she'd had where Brick could talk and had opinions about chickens. Mara laughed until tears ran down her face. Cole just watched them both, his heart so full it ached. Later, after Piper had been tucked into bed and Brick had claimed his spot at her feet, Cole and Mara stood on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains. "Do you think she'll be all right?" Mara asked. "After everything?" "I think she's stronger than both of us put together," Cole said. "But yeah, she'll be all right. We'll make sure of it." Mara leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "What about you? Are you all right?" Cole thought about the question, about the darkness he'd carried for so long, the violence and the guilt and the fear that he'd never be more than the sum of his worst actions. He thought about the moment he'd pulled the trigger to save Mara and Piper, the moment he'd offered himself in Piper's place, the moment he'd wrenched the gun from Eleanor's hand. He'd done what needed doing, and he'd do it again. But he'd also built a fire for his family, held his wife while she cried, promised a little girl she was safe. Maybe that was enough. "Yeah," he said finally, "I think I am." Mara turned in his arms, her hands coming up to frame his face. "I love you, Cole Ransom. I loved you when you were covered in dust and trying to save a dying woman. I loved you when you married me to keep us safe. I loved you when you stood between us and my mother with nothing but your bare hands." Her voice broke. "And I love you now, standing here with me, choosing this life every single day." Cole's throat closed. He pulled her close, kissing her with everything he had, gratitude and wonder and a love so fierce it burned. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Mara smiled. "Come to bed," she said simply. And Cole did. That night, for the first time since they'd married, they came together not as strangers bound by necessity, but as husband and wife in truth. Mara's touch was gentle and reverent, tracing the scars on his chest, his arms, his hands. Cole worshipped her in return, every mark, every line, every part of her that had carried her through hell and brought her to him. They loved each other slow and careful, learning the shape and feel of bodies long denied, finding joy in the closeness, in the trust, in the simple miracle of being alive and together. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, Mara's head on Cole's chest, his hand stroking her hair. "This is real," Mara whispered. "Isn't it? Not just the marriage on paper, all of it." "Yeah," Cole said, his voice rough with emotion. "It's real." "Good." Mara's arm tightened around him. "Because I'm not letting you go." "Good," Cole echoed, "because I'm not going anywhere." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, hearts beating in tandem, two people who'd been broken finding themselves whole. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. Cole worked the ranch, fixing fence, moving cattle, preparing for winter. Mara threw herself into making the house a home, sewing curtains, planting a garden, teaching Piper to read from the worn books she'd brought from Millerton. Piper thrived, her laughter ringing through the house, her nightmares growing less frequent. Letters came from Elias Crane. Eleanor Hastings had been formally charged with kidnapping and conspiracy. The investigation into Daniel Vale's death had uncovered a connection between Eleanor's lawyer and the men who'd killed him. She would stand trial in the spring. Mara read the letter once, then burned it in the stove. "I'm done with her," she said simply. "She doesn't get any more of my time." Cole understood. Some ghosts you had to exorcise, others you just had to stop feeding. In early November, the first snow fell. Piper dragged Cole and Mara outside to build a snowman, Brick watching from the porch with feline disdain. They worked together, rolling snow into balls, finding stones for eyes and a carrot for a nose. When they finished, Piper stepped back, surveyed their work, and declared it perfect. That night, as they sat by the fire, Piper climbed into Cole's lap. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always." "Are you my papa now, for real?" Cole's heart clenched. He looked at Mara, who nodded, her eyes bright. "If you want me to be," Cole said carefully. Piper considered this with her usual gravity. "I think I do, because my first papa is gone, and you're here, and you saved us, and you make Mama happy." She paused. "And you let Brick sleep inside." Cole's laugh came out choked. "Those are good reasons." "So can I call you Papa?" Cole pulled her close, his voice rough. "Yeah, sweetheart. You can call me Papa." Piper beamed, then wriggled free and ran to tell Brick the news. The cat, unimpressed, went back to sleep. Mara crossed to Cole and sank onto his lap where Piper had been, her arms going around his neck. "You're crying," she said softly, wiping at his cheeks. "Yeah," Cole admitted, "I am." "Happy tears?" "The happiest." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I never thought I'd have this again, a family, a home, someone who—" His voice broke. "Someone who sees me and stays anyway." "I'm not going anywhere," Mara said, echoing his words from weeks ago. "You're stuck with me, Cole Ransom, for better or worse." "Mostly better," Cole said. "Mostly," Mara agreed, and kissed him. Outside, the snow fell soft and steady, blanketing the ranch in white. Inside, the fire burned warm, the lamp glowed gold, and three people who'd been lost found themselves found. Winter deepened, harsh and beautiful. Cole taught Piper to track rabbits in the snow, to read the weather in the clouds, to gentle a spooked horse with patience and soft words. Mara sewed a quilt from scraps of Sarah's old dresses and her own worn clothes, stitching their stories together in fabric and thread. They celebrated Christmas with a pine tree dragged in from the hills, strung with popcorn and paper stars Piper made herself. On Christmas morning, Piper unwrapped a carved wooden horse Cole had made in the barn late at night. She cradled it like treasure and declared it the best gift she'd ever received. Mara gave Cole a new shirt, stitched with care, and a kiss that promised more when Piper was asleep. Cole gave Mara a locket, simple silver, with a photograph inside of the three of them taken in redstone before they'd left. Mara cried and didn't take it off. In January, a letter came from the territorial governor's office. Eleanor Hastings had been found guilty on all charges. She'd been sentenced to 20 years in prison. She would not be eligible for parole. Mara read the letter aloud, her voice steady. When she finished, she folded it carefully and placed it in the fire. "It's over," she said. "It's over," Cole agreed. That night, they made a love with a desperation born of relief, of survival, of the knowledge that they'd fought and won and come out the other side intact. Afterward, lying in the darkness, Mara's hand found Cole's stomach. "I need to tell you something," she said. Cole's heart skipped. "What?" "I'm pregnant." The world stopped, then restarted, brighter and more vivid than before. "You're—" Cole couldn't finish the sentence. His hand covered hers, trembling. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Mara's voice shook with laughter and tears. I've known for a few weeks. I was waiting for the right moment. And this is it? This is it. She turned to face him, her eyes shining in the moonlight. We're going to have a baby, Cole. Another child. Another chance. Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight he was afraid he'd hurt her. I love you, he said, the words spilling out, inadequate and true. I love you so damn much. I love you too. Mara kissed him, fierce and claiming. And we're going to be all right, all of us. They told Piper at breakfast the next morning. The girl's eyes went wide, then she let out a shriek of delight and ran around the table to hug Mara's middle. I'm going to be a big sister, she said, awed. You are, Mara said, laughing. Piper looked up at Cole. Is the baby going to call you Papa too? I hope so, Cole said, his throat tight. Good. Piper nodded, satisfied. Then we'll really be a family. We're already a family, Cole said, ruffling her hair. I know. Piper grinned. But now we'll be a bigger one. The baby came in August, a boy with dark hair and his mother's eyes. They named him Daniel after Mara's first husband, and James after Cole's father. Daniel James Ransom came into the world screaming and didn't stop until Mara put him to her breast. Then he quieted, content and warm, and Cole looked down at his son and felt his heart expand in ways he hadn't known were possible. Piper was entranced. She sat beside Mara on the bed, her small hand resting on the baby's head, her face solemn with responsibility. I'll protect him, she announced, just like you protected me. I know you will, Cole said. And she did. Piper became Daniel's fiercest guardian, chasing away Brick when he got too curious, singing to him when he cried, reporting his every movement like it was news of national importance. Mara laughed herself breathless watching them, and Cole fell in love with his family all over again, deeper, richer, more complete. The seasons turned, the ranch prospered. They hired a hand to help with the cattle, a young man from Benton who reminded Cole of himself at that age, hungry for honest work, running from something he wouldn't name. Cole paid him fair, worked him hard, and didn't ask questions. The man stayed. Years passed. Piper grew tall and strong, learning to rope and ride, to read Latin and do sums, to stand her ground and speak her mind. Daniel grew from baby to toddler to boy, bright and curious and fearless. Mara bloomed in the life she'd built, her laughter filling the house, her touch still setting Cole's blood on fire even after years of marriage. And Cole became the man he'd always wanted to be. The darkness was still there, coiled and ready when needed, but it no longer defined him. He was a husband, a father, a rancher, a man who kept his promises and protected what was his with everything he had. One evening in late September, when the air was turning cool and the aspens were blazing gold on the hillsides, Cole stood on the porch watching the sun set. Mara came out to join him, Daniel on her hip, Piper at her side. She handed Daniel to Cole and leaned against the railing, her gaze following the light as it painted the mountains crimson and purple. What are you thinking about? She asked. Cole looked at his family, at his wife, still beautiful, still fierce, at his daughter, no longer the terrified child in the basin, but a young woman in the making, at his son, babbling and reaching for the sky. I'm thinking, Cole said, that I'm the luckiest man alive. Mara smiled. Good answer. It's true. Cole shifted Daniel to one arm and wrapped the other around Mara. 3 years ago, I was living like a ghost, going through the motions. And then you showed up, broken and dying and dragging this little warrior behind you, and everything changed. You changed it, Mara said. You chose to save us. You didn't have to. Yeah, I did. Cole's voice was certain. Because the moment I saw you, something in me woke up, something I thought was dead, and I couldn't walk away from that, from you. Mara's eyes filled. We saved each other. Yeah, Cole agreed. We did. Piper tugged on Cole's sleeve. Papa? Yes, sweetheart? Can we light the lamp for people who might be lost? Cole looked down at her, surprised. It was something he used to do in the early days, light the lamp in the window so travelers could find their way. He hadn't done it in years. Why? He asked. Piper shrugged. Because you found us when we were lost. Maybe someone else needs finding too. Cole's throat tightened. He looked at Mara, who nodded, her smile soft and proud. All right, Cole said. Let's light the lamp. They went inside together, all four of them. Cole lit the oil lamp and set it in the window, the flame steady and bright. It cast a warm glow across the porch, across the yard, a beacon in the gathering dark. Piper pressed her nose to the glass, watching the light. Do you think anyone will see it? Maybe, Cole said. And if they do, they'll know there's a place here, a safe place. A home, Mara added. A home, Cole agreed. They stood there in the lamplight, the four of them together, the house warm around them and the night vast beyond. And Cole thought about all the roads that had led him here, the violence, the loss, the years of numbness and grief. He thought about the day he'd found Mara and Piper dying in the basin, the choice he'd made to stop, to help, to care. It had been the best choice of his life, because here, now, in this house that had once been a tomb, there was light, there was laughter, there was love, there was home. Outside, the lamp burned steady in the window, a promise to anyone lost or broken or searching, a promise that said, come in from the cold, come in from the dark. You're safe here, you're welcome here, you're home. And in the house on the Wyoming plains, the Ransom family settled in for the night, together, safe, and whole at last.